Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar, joining myself and Roy, who was completely unplanned to join me, but here he is with me. Today's webinar is a day in the life of Microsoft 365 admin. It's a labor of love. And it's actually a first episode of a series that I came up with. So the idea is here to kind of tackle daily challenges and topics around Microsoft 365 administration and kind of break them down a bit. I apologize in advance for my voice. This is the reason why Roy Martinez is with me here today, just in case I go completely voiceless or have like a cough attack. So thank you for your understanding, and I hope it's going to be okay for the next 25 minutes. I see that there's some people joining, so let's literally wait another 15 seconds or so. And then let's kick off with the material because as I mentioned, we only have 25 minutes and I've produced quite a lot of slides. So hopefully we are gonna go through it well. Before I actually jump to the topic, there's a few of the housekeeping rules so I can go through them as well. If you experience any technical issues, please drop us a message in the chat. This event is being recorded, so at the moment we are live, and I didn't plan to be sick, but this is being recorded. So if for whatever reason you can't make it to the end of the session, you will also get an email from us with the recording. There will be some time at the very end of the webinar to ask some questions and have a short discussion, but you can, of course, put your questions as well in the questions section in the chat. I will start with introduction of myself. My name is Kasia Nowicka. I'm product marketing manager here at CoreView. I have been with CoreView for over 4.5 years, and I actually have been working in field. So I have been working as a solution architect and previously in Microsoft official support for Office 365 back then. So I'm pretty engraved in the whole Microsoft 365 ecosystem for quite a long time now. And with me, as I said, last minute, not planned situation, there is Roy Martinez. So Roy, I will let you introduce yourself. I apologize, I don't have a slide for you.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Here, I'm what they call a technology evangelist. So I basically spend all my time, talking about CoreView and how wonderful it is for our clients. And I work with Kasia in the product marketing division. And like her, I haven't been quite as long at CoreView, but I do have a pretty long track record of working in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So I came from the collaboration content migration space. So yeah, I've seen SharePoint grow into Teams, grow into what it is today. So yeah, looking forward to sharing whatever insight I can here.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks very much. Right, so agenda for today, 25-minute session is a few words in general about admin roles in Microsoft 365. What are they? How many of there are? How we can set it up. Then I have selected a few roles that I would like to talk about more in depth. It's impossible to cover all of the admin roles in a 25-minute session, and I will explain that in a moment why. Then what we can do about let's say about the native experience, and is there any extensibility or customization possibilities to that? What is the alternative, very briefly, and then we're going to jump to Q&A and discussion. So without further ado, let's start and jump into the content. Microsoft 365 admin roles. My dear audience, again, probably there's a lot of practitioners here on that call that have been working with Microsoft 365 or Office 365 for years, even more than myself and Roy combined. But when the last time I actually went to count how many out of the box Microsoft 365 admin roles there are, well, there weren't as many as there are now. So I took my time to prepare for this webinar, and there are 79 out of the box available admin roles in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. They are segregated in certain categories, such as collaboration, devices, global, and so on and so forth. There's also pretty vague descriptions as others and whatnot. I believe I was very surprised when I saw license manager. I think it was in the section other, and I was like, how is that intuitive? How is that kind of makes sense to anything. And if you think, or if you know that 79 roles exist, great. If you think that's the end of the story, it's not the end of the story. So these 79 roles are actually the tip of the iceberg, because they are only a subset of all the roles that are available in Azure AD portal. I should probably say Entra ID at the moment, and Intune Admin Center. So 79 is only the tip of the iceberg. Roy, are you surprised by that?
I actually am, yeah. So I knew there was a lot. I've never done this count before, so this is kind of news to me as well. But yeah, it's interesting to note how deep that rabbit hole really goes. It really is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it is. And then if you go to Azure AD Admin Center or any documentation, there's like a long list. I had to stop at some point and just cut it to kind of go through all of that. So I'm not going to bore you, but it's a lot to digest and to memorize what are the possibilities and who can do what within the Microsoft 365 environment. And more to that story is that some of these 79 roles, having access to certain admin centers, will even have their own subset of administrative roles that you can assign to employees. So here I have the example of a Exchange admin center that I went to. As you can see, all of these are not the admin roles that we can primarily assign, but rather than a subset that is available directly from the Exchange admin center. So there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of admin roles that you can actually choose from. Like I mentioned, naming convention, in my opinion, it's not the greatest, and some of them are not sounding like something that I think the role would be able to perform or view or management actions tied to it. So it might be a bit confusing, and who has the time to memorize all of that, honestly. Right, so let's move on. This is pretty obvious, but I'm going to start with it as a preamble to my next content on that slide. So the first person that becomes Microsoft 365, who sets up Microsoft 365 tenant, becomes the global administrator, and that's pretty obvious. And there are certain recommendations for setting global admins and a tenant in any way. So I'm going to talk about that. They have nearly unlimited power. I say nearly, and that's on purpose. I have a slide on global admins further down the road, so I'll explain that. However, a few recommendations and tips, and I'm very curious to know from the audience. I don't know if you want to share that within the chat, or maybe just like after the webinar to have a discussion with us, because there is a point, at least one for me, that I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. But let's start from the beginning. So the recommendation is to have 2 to 4 global admins, of course, assign them the least permissive role, and require multi-factor authentication for all admins. That's pretty straightforward. Now, the fourth point, the best practice, or like an advice that is widely recommended, not only by Microsoft, but like security standards and security benchmarks and whatnot, is that admin accounts should be different from the end user accounts for the same person. So what it means that if I have an account, Kasia Nowicka at corby.com, I probably should not have administrator roles assigned to that identity rather than have a completely separate one. Now the question is how many actual extra identities you would have to create to achieve that. So maybe you could consider a third-party solution that could serve as a proxy admin to handle that administrative access for you. Admins don't need a license to be an admin, so it's pretty obvious now. Like when you're creating a user, it's well written, but it wasn't always the case. So that was a myth kind of going in the industry. They don't need a license to be an admin, so you can have a user with no licenses to be an admin, unless you want that admin to have specific let's say capabilities. Then sometimes they need like Entra premium licenses and whatnot. Can externals be users be assigned an admin role? The answer is simple: yes, they can. However, they cannot be global admins. So global administrators have to come from your own directory, from your own tenant. Now, the last point is something that I'm very curious to know your opinion, because it is apparently advisable to have a Break Plus account directly in the cloud, not synchronized, with a complex password somewhere stored in a password manager without MFA enabled, and only to use it in the event of an outage with MFA. I'm curious how many knew about that and how many are doing that today. Roy, would you say that this is like a common knowledge and common practice?
I think it's one of those things where it's common knowledge and people kind of understand that, but I kind of don't see it in practice often, at least in the environments that I work with. But like you, I'm very curious what the audience here today has to say about that. Is this something that you guys put in practice? Again, I hear it a lot, but I don't ever see it really, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anyhow, let's move forward. How we can assign a role, again, a few basics with a few kind of comments here. So of course we can create a user and assign them a role in the admin center. You can have the option to kind of save it as a user template, which I will talk about in a moment as well. You can edit a user in the admin center, or you can do it via PowerShell. You can either do it via the PowerShell, Azure Active Directory PowerShell for Graph module, or for Windows PowerShell. The trick with using the Azure Active Directory, I keep saying that I cannot switch to Entra, sorry, is that the names can be different from the ones in Azure AD PowerShell. So for example, SharePoint Administrator role in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center is actually SharePoint Service Administrator in Azure AD PowerShell. So just be careful about that. And then when you are wanting to make multiple changes and kind of do bulk changes on many objects, it might become cumbersome, and it's not very easy to do in Admin Center unless you actually do it via PowerShell, and then probably end up generating a CSV file and then perusing it for further changes. Right, so user templates. I was actually testing that just before the webinar as well to make sure that everything I knew is right, and sadly I am. So user templates may be useful. However, when you are adding someone and you say, okay, I want Roy to be SharePoint administrator, but I also want him to be some sort of other role, and I save it as a template, it does not actually save it just the role. It saves the whole bunch of other information, and it's not very easily editable. So you would rather need to delete and recreate it from the scratch. So it's pretty tricky to work with the user templates natively in Admin Center. This is at least what I found. If you found a better way to kind of manage them, let us know as well. I will gladly know that. So yeah, that's an example of a license, a user template that I was creating in my environment. So as you can see, it kind of saves all the information regarding the product licenses, password settings, the domain name, and so on and so forth. So I could not just focus on the roles itself. Now, some of the roles that I would like to talk about a bit more in depth. Again, having hundreds of them, I could have either go for the uncommon ones or super common ones. And I went with the roles that I think are, it's all about security, I think. So the roles that are worth talking about. So of course, I have to start with the global admin, right? So global admin and then billing admin and exchange admin is the first kind of set of roles that I would like to talk about. Global admin is nearly like a godlike role. So they can do pretty much everything except managing their own passwords. So make sure you have that backup. This is why the recommendation is to have at least 2 global admins. And you would think that in today's kind of era, it's pretty common knowledge, and that organizations are following that advice. It's not. Like, I've been talking to one of the largest prospects, like literally globally, and you would be surprised how many organizations have over 100, 150 global admins. So that is not always the case, and it's very risky. And so the tip here is to consider do all of these people truly need the global admin rights, or maybe we can assign them a lower level of administrative rights. Maybe we can create a custom role for them. Maybe they only need the view kind of visibility only on the environment rather than having the management capabilities. So you might be considering assigning a global reader role to them instead. The next role that I selected was the billing admin. So billing admin is actually an underestimated role in my opinion. So Microsoft is actually recognizing that role pretty high. What does it mean? That it means that if you can pass the security check at the Microsoft technical support, you can actually get access to pretty unique information such as tenant ID or whatnot. So you can get a lot of information, maybe about the payment methods or some financial information. So it's a very highly privileged role that is often underestimated in my opinion. So again, the tip here or the advice here is to considering the global reader role, or maybe creating a custom role via Azure AD, that commerce billing type management actions instead. And interesting thing here is that it is possible with Microsoft 365. I presume again that most of our audience here is probably leveraging volume licensing or enterprise agreements and whatnot. However, it is possible to have a mix and match of different types of subscription and the source of them within a tenant. So if it happens that, I don't know, somebody purchased a project license with a credit card, even if somebody else is a billing admin, they cannot see it. So only the person who actually added the payment method in the admin center can see it. It doesn't matter if you're a billing admin or not. I thought it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Moving, right? It's like not so obvious. Right, let's go to the Exchange admin. So Exchange admin is the, in my opinion, second after global admin that is like the godlike role. Exchange admins have so much responsibility, but they can also have access to content. So this is, they primarily should be dealing with settings for mailboxes and compliance settings and whatnot. But it's a real case example. So I work with somebody who worked with Exchange admin in a financial institution in a big national bank, and for absolutely zero reason, that Exchange admin decided to get the content of a mailbox of a CEO. So you know, that ended up with losing their job, but that also ended with actual legal proceedings and a fine for a financial institution. So Exchange admin has actually super powers in the Microsoft 365. And let's not forget that Exchange is sort of like a backbone for the whole Microsoft 365, because we're going to be talking not only about the Exchange, but also the backbone for the SharePoint and Teams and whatnot, and the groups and so on and so forth. One tip or like advice that I can give you here is that when you're assigning Exchange admin role, if you really have to do it and you trust the employee to have that role, consider assigning them also a service support administrator role. So they are also have the visibility on the service health and all the release notifications, so they can have that visibility without asking, let's say, others. Moving forward, different topic: user admins and help desk admins. Roy, do you know the difference?
No, I don't actually. So
okay,
let's talk about it.
Let me tell you, because fairly common use terminology, and it might again kind of cause a confusion. So what is user admin? What is help desk admin? Is user admin always a good choice for us? So I was trying to make it a visual representation, and this is the best what I could have come up with. I know it might not be perfect, but let me try to explain that. So the green bit that we can see here is the help desk admin. Help desk admin essentially can do only 4 things: monitor the service health, service requests, reset passwords, and force users to sign out. Perfect. Very little management options. And all of that, it can be done for non-global admins, plus 5 roles that are written here on the purple bit down. Now, user admin can do everything that the help desk admin can do, also for the non-global admins and the listed roles, plus deleting and restoring users, managing usernames, and updating the device keys. However, they can also do that top a bit when you have on blue the add users groups, assign licenses, and so on and so forth. You can do these for all of the users, not just non-admins. And global admin is, of course, the most powerful role. So if you find this iconography helpful, of course, that's going to be available in the recording. But if you think it's something helpful, let us know. We're going to post it on our website or just even send it to you. So that's a few words about users, user admins and help desk admins. And now the favorite one for you, Roy, actually. So let's complicate things a bit with SharePoint admins and Teams admins. I know that's your jam, so let's talk about these guys. SharePoint admin. SharePoint admin, of course, have access to SharePoint Admin Center, to all the content. And in theory, should have access to OneDrive Admin Center. I don't know why, but I tested it even today, and I did not have access to OneDrive Admin Center, right? We need to double check our environment, what's happening out there. But in theory, I should have access to OneDrive Admin Center as well. Of course, the primarily role here is to create, manage sites, manage sites quotas, manage site admins. Another terminology might be confusing. I will explain in a second. Manage sharing settings and manage Microsoft 365 groups. I think that actually we can manage the other groups as well, excluding the Exchange properties. What's tricky? Tricky is that SharePoint is actually the backbone for Teams, right? So again, we need to ask ourselves a question whether somebody should have the full SharePoint and Teams admin rights, or perhaps Teams is just sufficient. Every organization is different. I can't answer this question for you. Just keep that in mind kind of when selecting the role. Of course, global admin is by default already a SharePoint admin. SharePoint admin can view user information, cannot modify the existing information. So that's the difference, that global admin will be able to use modify the user information. SharePoint administrator cannot. Now, so this is like a quick summary of what I just said about the SharePoint admin. Let's build that with the site admins. So site admins, this is an interesting term. I know it's somehow confusing. I know we don't have too much time, but I will try to say. So in the past, we had the concept of the site collections, right? And because of that, unlike the modern sites that we have now, we had one big site with subsites underneath. That's pretty simple. So that site with the subsites was called a site collection. And so each of the subsites could have the site owners, site members, site visitors. And so the site collection itself had a separate role called the site collection administrator. So it was like a truly highest privilege within the SharePoint that you could have had. So now the site collection administration is kind of replaced with the site admin, because now the infrastructure and the modern sites is flat. So we have site admins instead of, so that's the kind of a new terminology that we have here. They can manage sites, but they are actually not an admin in Microsoft 365. So they're just kind of limited to managing the permissions, the restricting the access where necessary for the site, manage the content type of the site, but they have zero pretty much management capabilities for the Microsoft 365 administration side of the tenant, so to say. So they don't have access to SharePoint online admin centers, to any other admin centers whatsoever. Therefore, they will also not be able to ever see any user information. I hope that is pretty clear. If you have any comments here, as always, please feel free to add to the chat.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll have a dedicated webinar just for SharePoint administration. I think we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Again, 25 minutes is very little time to explore of that, all of that. But if you would like to hear about anything more specifically, let us know. So that's the comparison, SharePoint admin versus site admin, what I've discussed so far. But there is also a third admin role that comes into that mix, is the Teams admin, right? So it is kind of like a super admin role within Teams. Have access to the Teams admin center. They don't have access to the SharePoint admin center, but still they have access to the content, because the content is essentially within Teams. So again, when you are choosing that role, make sure that you assign it to a high-profile employee that you really trust, because it actually allows you to see a lot and manage every feature of Teams environment, including the content. So that can be a tricky one. And Teams itself has 4 sub roles. Sorry. So we have Teams communication, administration, support engineer, support specialist, and device admin. Again, we could have a completely separate webinar about that. So just a quick comparison. This is how it looks like in regards to who can do and see what. Oh, I even added a little kind of note that even though you can manage M365 groups by Teams admin and SharePoint admin, you can't update the Exchange properties. Again, this will be available for you after the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, let us know. Right, so what are your options? There are native tools or functionalities, I should rather say, that can help you either craft custom roles or minimize the risk by having timed access with the privileged identity management, or you can segment your environment using the administrative unit. You could have alerts when somebody is assigned a role. So there are tons of options to explore, and I started writing a blog series. And again, that was the first one that I did, but I have to start somewhere. So there is a blog out there this week on Microsoft 365 tenant segmentation with Azure AD, Entra ID administrative units. You can scan the QR code and be taken to the blog. I'm writing there about the limitations and also what it is, how can it be useful, what it can cover. So I will be posting these blogs. I will be actually exploring these other options about privileged identity management, about the custom roles and whatnot, and the blog series. So you're more than welcome to visit that one. Is there any other kind of alternative to the whole headache of admin roles? Yes, there is. And of course, I have to mention that it's actually core view. So the whole process of creating crafted roles, let's imagine that you are, I don't know, a large organization with hundreds of different subsidiaries. Each subsidiary has a different vision of how their part or department or agency, and maybe are from public sector, should run, and who should be who in the environment, how high privileges they should have, what kind of management tasks they can do. So it can be as easy as few clicks, and what it can actually mean is that you can also reverse the changes or edit the changes again on the spot within a couple of clicks. You're not going through the whole challenge of, again, revisiting all of the available out of the box actions to truly understand what it means, what is the best scenario for us. But you either create a truly customizable, very granular role-based access control permissions, and yeah, combined with the tenant segmentation, it can be super powerful. But enough about that. We have a QA time, so I know we are over time already. So thank you so much for everyone who was and is with us still. So if there is any questions, any feedback, now's the time.
There's a question in the chat here that they asked, is there a simple example you can give of when to use help desk admin versus user admin?
Yeah, I mean, user admin, it's like we saw, so much more powerful, can also manage usernames, can delete users. So help desk admin is truly the least permissive. That's the key role. If you truly want to give it to like a tier 1 support, some kind of like a local operators that should not be able to remove identities, to change usernames, to even touch any non-admin accounts. So that's truly the first kind of the role that I would start with. And then if somebody kind of maybe earns your trust, and then I would consider the user admin role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a SharePoint question. We probably again have a SharePoint webinar, but they ask, does the site admin role exactly mirror the historical site collection admin role? I think you kind of covered some of that, but it kind of does. I think the notion of a site collection has changed pretty significantly in SharePoint Modern. It is still technically a site collection, frankly. You can still technically make subsites and have that hierarchical kind of SharePoint grouping situation. But yeah, they are functionally pretty much identical. So what you knew of as a site collection administrator is now what we call a site admin.
That's it?
Yep, that's what I got.
Okay, fantastic. So let's wrap it. Yeah, at the very end, just wanted to also encourage you to download the actually super cool, useful ebook, the No Nonsense Guide to Microsoft 365 Delegated Administration, and also see a 90-second demo of Core View. So always welcome to do that. Last but not least, I think that's the last slide I have. We're going to actually have a thank you giveaway for 3 people that we're going to draw from the attendees. So again, thank you so much for taking your time today to spend nearly half an hour with us. Yeah, we'll notify you via email if you're the lucky winner. Other than that, that's a wrap. So thank you so much. Thanks, Roy, for joining me. Luckily, you can still speak. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day and afternoon. Bye-bye.
Take care now.